the Commonwealth of Virginia is on the verge of groundbreaking legislation, a new law that would exempt its residents from the mandatory federal health care requirements of the bill now being debated on Capitol Hill. Joining me from Washington is Virginia state lawmaker Bob Marshall. He's a Republican, and he is the one who sponsored this bill, which has now passed. Delegate Marshall, thanks so much for being here.
Well, thanks for considering this a big story, because it is.
Well, you helped me flesh out just how big it is, because when I read up on your bill, some said it's just a stunt and this isn't likely actually to do anything. Others say this actually could be teeing up a matter that could put this case before the U.S. Supreme Court. First, tell us what your bill actually does.
Okay, what it does, it says when Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi want to march into your living room and say, sit down, we're going to explain to you that for the next 3 years you're going to pay taxes, and after that we're going to present a contract to you for health care insurance, and you say, I don't really want this contract, or I'd like different terms, they're going to tell you no. Say, well, I don't like this because I don't want to pay for abortion. They say, tough. Virginia is, and then they say, well, you're going to have to do this anyway. Say, if I don't pay the fine, what happens? You go to jail for a year, pay a $25,000 fine. That's where Virginia steps in and says, please leave their home. We'll see you in court, because we're saying no resident may be compelled to pay a fine, penalty, fee, or anything to purchase health insurance that they don't want to. Megan, when you went to law school, you know that a contract has to be entered into voluntarily by both sides. This is a forced contract. This is treating people as serfs, not citizens. Yeah, but the government, the federal government, makes us do all sorts of things that we don't want to do. I mean, in most cases, contracts are voluntary, but when it comes to the federal government, often not so much. And they have very broad latitude to regulate us based on the Commerce Clause of the U.S. Constitution. The Commerce Clause, let's back up a second. Two cases have indicated that the Congress cannot compel the states to submit blindly. Number one, New York versus U.S., which stated that the state of New York did not have to accept regulatory waste that Congress said it had to. The Supreme Court said this violates the 10th Amendment. 1997 case, Prince versus U.S., a sheriff in Montana said, I'm not going to implement your national background check in Montana. The Supreme Court said he's right. States can't be compelled to do this. Two cases dealing with interstate commerce power stated in Lopez versus U.S. and Morrison versus U.S. Yeah,
that's a gun rights case and a Violence Against Women Act.
Congress attempted to say violent, acts near schools or whatever, guns near schools cannot be used as an interstate commerce regulatory action, even if there is an effect economically down the road.
Just a short form for our viewers, in those two cases you mentioned, what the Supreme Court held was that the Fed's power under the Commerce Clause is not unlimited, and that Congress can step in and say, you've gone too far, you don't have that much, the courts can step in and say, you don't have that much power, Congress, so back off. But because Virginia is not the only state doing this, according to what I read, 34 other state legislatures have either filed or proposed similar measures. So my question to you is, are you attempting to tee this up so that it will wind up before the U.S. Supreme Court? The Fed's trying to enforce what may become law by the end of this week, and you, Virginia, and other states saying, we're not going to do it.
We are anticipating that Congress will still keep these individual mandates in there, despite the fact that the Congressional Research Service has told members of Congress this is completely novel, and this is highly problematic to do this. The Congressional Budget Office has said, Congress, you've never done this before. This is completely unprecedented. Because of the determination with which the Obama people seem to proceed ahead on this matter, we are concerned that they will. It is our responsibility, James Madison said, the father of the Constitution, as state legislators, to defend our citizens against federal usurpations. I'm simply doing my duty under the Constitution.
So, and I got to keep this short, but the Virginia governor is expected to sign this thing into law. So let's say the health care passes here in Washington, or down in Washington this week, and then Governor McDonnell signs your bill and it becomes law down there. And if somebody does refuse to pay the fee for health insurance and some sort of adverse action is pursued against them, the state of Virginia will step in, and this thing will become a viable legal debate between the state and the feds?
This is how it happens. If I get an income tax return and I'm not paying this fine, I'm not paying the fee, the IRS says to the Commissioner of Revenue for Virginia, done his tax return. The Attorney General, Cuccinelli, steps in and says, don't touch Marshall's tax return. Or if the IRS goes to the local sheriff and tries to say, we want you to sell some property of his, put it up for auction, the Attorney General again steps in and says, you can't do that. We have a law. The Attorney General, it's the Commonwealth of Virginia versus the IRS. We are teeing this up because we are annoyed, and it's not just Virginia. I have never seen such a response to a proposition in Congress that has riled up so many states, liberal, moderate, and conservative. It's across the board, Megan.
I was surprised to see, actually, that even though you're a Republican, you got some wide Democratic support on this. They voted 80-17 on Wednesday to support the measure. So we'll be watching it.
55% of the right.
As I say, it's not just Virginia. It's 34 other states at least looking at it. So, Delegate Marshall, all the best. Thanks for coming on and explaining it to us.
Thank you, Megan.